Good afternoon, Patriots, and welcome to the 66th audio file in the audio cast series known as the Q News Patriot. I'm the Q News Patriot, coming to you with the fifth rendition now of this file. My name is SG Anon. I very much appreciate the patience and the grace that each of you have shown as we've been building up to this file. I've actually been researching the content of this file since prior to recording file 65. But as we approach the end of the year, things in my day job, my personal life, they do require some balance. There has been some acceleration, of course, as the holidays begin to kick into swing. And we've had quite a fun and interesting time balancing the different challenges, the nuances, the idiosyncrasies that life brings to us, and managing those in addition to bringing each of you relevant, current, pertinent information that is important in my own belief and estimation, important to the formulation of our opinions as we look at what's happening in the world. That responsibility is not lost on me, and I appreciate each of you for the trust that you place into the reporting that I bring. Without further ado, Patriots, I thought we'd go ahead and get right to it. As you can see in the background, we have a number of different content matters, if we can call it that, a number of different line items that we're going to discuss that highlight out the irregular espionage nature of what's occurring in the world. We really are living in a dual or multi-reality world, if we want to call it that, right? A multiverse, if we could say something like that. We have the underground war, which is continuing at breakneck pace. We've actually made significant advances in that recently. We have, cooperation between different component patriot militaries that we would believe at the surface level to be antagonistic to one another because of their black hat components. But there are white hat components, patriotic actors within those entities and those organizations that are seeking to cooperate against the saboteurs within their own ranks, as well as against the intelligence community and the deep state families overall, to help bring the system down, right? To help bring it all of the way out from the shadows and into the public fold, and then utilize public favor and opinion and swift military justice to bring an end to what has amounted to a multi-thousand-year reign of terror here in the world. I thought we'd go ahead and start with a little bit of some victory news today, something that's very positive, very highlighting, very encouraging, and serves to highlight the nature of the dual realities that we're talking about. On the 10th of November, just a couple of weeks back, we had the U.S. Embassy issue a volcanic alert in Reykjavik, Iceland. The location was Grindavik in the Reykjanes Peninsula, southwest Iceland. The National Commissioner of the Icelandic Police declared a civil protection alert following an intense wave of earthquakes on November the 10th at Sunduki, north of Grindavik. The activity could indicate magma movement and a volcanic eruption in the area near Mount Thorbjorn in the area of Svartsengi power plant and the Blue Lagoon. Now, this alert came on November the 10th, right, of 2023. November the 10th is also the birthday of the United States Marine Corps. And if we remember from very early November, I believe it was on November the 1st or late October, the United States Marine Corps Central Command issued a notice where they canceled the annual Marine Corps birthday ball. And they cited unforeseen operational commitments. The ball was scheduled initially for November the 16th as a celebration for the Marine Corps birthday. What is so astonishing about this is that the Marine Corps ball is very rarely, if ever canceled. There's a tremendous amount of esprit de corps that's found in the United States military, and nowhere is that more true than the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is sort of the tip of the spear arm, right, of the United States military, very well trained in assault warfare, very well trained in capture and control, right? And they're also well trained in missions like espionage, special operations, and search and destroy operational commitments. And so when we marry a couple of these, it looks very interesting that we have a cancellation of the ball, and yet on the Marine Corps' birthday, we have a tremendous amount of earthquake activity come out of Iceland. We know that there are extremely large tunnel systems that go from Scotland to Iceland to Greenland, and then actually east from Scotland over into Norway. These tunnel systems are a main vector for some of the darkest criminal activities imaginable, right? The same sorts of ancient tunnel systems that tie all of the way back to Gaul. They go all of the way back to the Roman Empire, the usage of the underground space by this deep state syndicate that has descended from the Canaanites and the Phoenicians of old. They have built underground civilization systems all across the European, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, continents and shelf areas, all through Scandinavia, and then, of course, across that North Sea area over towards Greenland and into what would now be modern day Canada. So I find it fascinating that the Marine Corps birthday coincided with the acknowledgement, I guess, the deployment, if we want to call it that, of these different volcanic alerts. Let's dig a little bit further here. If we go back to an article actually from Marines.mil that came out on October the 4th of 2023, a high threat IEDD exercise Northern Challenge, a first for the U.S. Marine Corps. In Keflavik, Iceland, U.S. Marine Corps explosive ordnance disposal operators participated in Exercise Northern Challenge 2023 alongside various NATO allies and partners from September the 21st to October the 5th, 2 days prior to the launch of hostilities in the Middle East. Northern Challenge is an annual Icelandic Coast Guard exercise designed to provide the most modernized explosive ordnance disposal training in the world. This year's iteration featured 16 nations and over 400 participants and marked the first time that the U.S. Marine Corps has participated in the exercise. So wait, in early October of 2023, we have the Marine Corps deployed to Iceland, an explosive ordnance capable detachment of the Marine Corps deployed to Iceland for an operation that occurred from September the 21st to October 5th. So excuse me, I misspoke. In September, we saw the deployment of this detachment, the conclusion of the exercise being the 5th of October, 2 days prior to the launch of hostilities in the Israel-Gaza area, 2 days prior to the stand down of the Israeli Mossad in real time, right? 2 days prior to the situation spiraling out of control in the Middle East and captivating the entire world's attention. And so what happened just over a month after that, right? We have October the 7th, then we come forward to November the 10th. We have all of these earthquakes in Iceland, over 1,400 of them recorded in a single 24-hour period. A number of them magnitude 4.5, 4.6, 5.2. And nearly all of them, at around about the same depth. Now, this is a pattern that we've seen play out, Anons, throughout this process in different underground theaters, certainly in the United States, certainly in South America, certainly in the Central Caribbean basin. At one point, we saw coordination, for example, with the Russian and Chinese navies in the Caribbean immediately prior to a series of earthquakes that rocked, some of the islands in that area. So November the 10th, we have this breakout of earthquakes, right, in Iceland. And what is so incredibly fascinating about that, what adds to this context, if we will, is that the same Marine Expeditionary Unit, the same special operations capable unit that deployed to the Red Sea in the Eastern Mediterranean in July of this year, and then in August met with delegates from the Saudi Arabian government in international waters aboard the USS Bataan. That same Marine Expeditionary Unit, the 26th MU, is the same unit that sent their explosive ordnance capable detachment to Iceland for this training exercise. The same Special Operations Marine Corps unit equipped with explosive ordnance capabilities went to Iceland for a training exercise a month prior to the breakout of these earthquakes. This is confirmation to me. This is confirmation to this Anon that the underground war is progressing forward at a rapid pace, and it is one of the reasons we are seeing the surface level chaos, the surface level destabilization breakout that we have seen break out. It's one of the reasons I believe we've seen the CIA highlighted in the Middle East, especially. It's one of the reasons the Israeli Mossad and the CIA are meeting with different Middle Eastern, representatives and governments, right? The Qatari foreign minister, the Saudi Arabian government, the Iranian government through proxy, right? The conversations that are occurring vis-a-vis Qatar. All of these, situations lining up to showcase a back and forth as we push the ball forward in the component areas that really count, as we destroy the hidden civilization capabilities of this deep state enemy, as we force all of them from underground up to the surface, and then we destroy their capabilities to go and flee back underground. We destroy the forts and the barracks and the different military installations that they could flee back to. Then they are left with no choice. They have to start as much chaos. They have to participate in as much destabilization, as much ignition of open conflict at the surface level as they can, because now the fight is being lost in a kinetic fashion. The only salvaging arm, right? The only way that any of them survive this on the other side, unless they choose to defect and work with us, is to cause as much chaos, as much confusion, as much disorder as possible at the surface level so that they can attempt to flee and get away that way. And it will fail, and it has failed this entire time. We saw earthquakes happen under Gaza immediately after the invasion from the IDF, or from the immediately after the beginning of that campaign on October the 7th. We saw earthquakes in northern Iran around about the same time. We saw earthquakes in northeast Saudi Arabia around about the same time, bordering the Strait of Hormuz, right? And so these are very pivotal areas. These are very, very old areas of the world. The tunnel systems that go beneath these areas of the world are thousands of years old. They've had a great deal of time to fortify them, to iron them out, to design them for their own purposes, right? And to equip them to be highly defensible. And so the special operation component of what's occurring in the world cannot be overstated. Indeed, it is the special operations component that primarily ties a lot of the Patriots in these militaries around the world together. It is the special operations capable U.S. military component forces, right? It's the special operations capable Russian military forces. Excuse me, it's the special operations capable Turkish and Saudi Arabian forces and Egyptian forces and Italian forces, right? We're seeing a component of patriots, a patriotic faction within these militaries around the world, turn themselves into an alliance that is now against their own ranks in some regards, the captured black hat operations within their institutions, but also against their governments as well, because those governments are simply extensions of the same black hat capture, right? The enemy is primarily the same, though the enemy controls pieces and parts along the game board, if we will, that cross dimensions in society. And so an unconventional and irregular way of fighting this is the only way forward. And we're seeing that coordination played out in stunning form, with the U.S. Marine Corps having to cancel the ball for operational commitments and then participating in these Icelandic exercises at the same time, or right around the same time that tremendous volcanic and earthquake activity happens in that area of the world. You know, the IDF is also involved in this in some regards from a patriotic faction point of view. We have the Black Hats, of course, being highlighted in the Israeli Defense Force, the surface level assault forces, the Israeli Mossad intelligence community, all of that sort of making its way into the public fold through very good citizen journalism in Gaza. But something that is receiving stunningly little attention in the alternate media community and even in the podcast space right now is the fact that the Israeli patriots are also being highlighted out for the Israeli We the People. The Palestinian patriots, right, are being highlighted out for the Palestinian people. And we do have components, especially acting on behalf of the Israeli Defense Force, that are in negotiations with Turkey, with Saudi Arabia, with the United States to help bring about a conclusive end to this Mossad deep state hydra that exists there in the state of Israel right now, while also preserving the integrity of the Palestinian people and the Jewish people to the greatest extent possible. This is a very deeply entrenched enemy in this area of the world. These population centers, these groups of people have been very terrorized, very controlled for a very long time. And so it is difficult to redirect an entire generational consciousness all in one fell swoop. And yet that is exactly what we are attempting to do here. And if we needed a little bit of confirmation to show that we're moving through things in an irregular way, but that we are succeeding in many regards, I have actually managed to dredge up an image that came out online. It came out on one of the forum boards very shortly after the launch of hostilities on October the 7th of 2023. And it shows that the Likud government, that Netanyahu and others have been placed into submission by Israeli patriots, presumably for war crimes. Let me go ahead and bring this over here and share this screen with each of you. It was very stunning to find this. I ran it through a couple of different photographic software programs just to isolate the pixels. It does not look like the pixels have changed at all. So I find it extremely interesting that this was able to surface. Here we are. So as we can see, Mr. Netanyahu is being led by Israeli patriots, police, dressed in police riot gear. And again, I think we can presume that this is perhaps for war crimes committed against the Israeli We the People. And it's worth noting that as we go through this process, we the people everywhere need to have control of the justice in our communities. We need to have control of the justice that occurs to those who did us wrong, right? A great deal of this operation has been to get everyone to the table with something that means something that is symbolically, culturally significant for them, right? The justice for the COVID-19 crime, the justice for the terrorism committed by the U.S. military-industrial complex for the last 50 plus years, the justice for all of the terrorism that has been financed by the U.S. State Department and committed against not only Americans, but also many other nations and creeds around the world. Getting everyone to the table, I think, is a major component of this type of an operation. And so how do you do that? Will you empower those individuals that are within their own communities to dispense the justice necessary to those that have grievously harmed both them and the rest of the world? And so it is fitting in this Anon's estimation that the Jewish people should be in a position now to put justice to the Likud government, to put justice to the Netanyahu government, in the same fashion that the Palestinians will very soon have the opportunity to put justice towards those terrorizing factions of the Hamas government, which, if we remember, was installed in 2006 with the assistance of the U.S. State Department. Moving through this process is extremely tenuous, I think, in some regards. It's very delicate, it's very confusing, and if we're not careful about where we're researching and the pictures that we're attempting to paint in the broadest sense possible, then I think we miss some of the meaning, some of the nuance that's contained within the picture, right? When we look at things like the underground war, when we look at things like the continuity of government operation, when we look at the gaffes by Mr. Joe Biden, when we look at Hunter Biden's involvement in different things and how that's going to play out very soon, I believe. When we look at the Trump trials and the Trump card, when we look at the election of Javier Milei in Argentina, right? This is a very we the people candidate. Yes, he is. He did participate, I believe, in the World Economic Forum at one point. It gives me great pause, right, of course, to acknowledge that, but we have to remember that one of the core tenets of his platform is to discontinue the central bank. This is not someone who is friendly to the World Economic Forum or the globalist agenda whatsoever. So we look at this and we have to acknowledge that there are some losses that are occurring here. There are some patriot triumphs, if we want to call it that. Deep state losses is what I'm highlighting. They're suffering different defections. They're suffering different losses. They're losing control of very old ancestral balances of power, right? Argentina, for example, is the same nation that a tremendous number of the Rothschild-based Nazi government from Nazi Germany in the 1940s and 50s, they fled to Argentina. And then many of them fled from Argentina down to Antarctica, right? And just off of the southern tip of Argentina, a couple of 100 miles, is Rothschild Island, right near the Antarctic shelf. So to lose control of that is indicative, in my own estimation, of some very intense infighting that is occurring in the world. Machines that have been traditionally used to flip votes are now not being used in certain elections in key theaters. Safe spaces, safe houses, ancestrally safe boundary lines, right, are now no longer safe for these individuals. And so we have a number of them warring back and forth with one another financially, in the business space, certainly in the military intelligence community, and as sort of every man for themselves. We saw another election where this power was lost in Western Europe with the appointment of the new Netherlands. I believe it's president. It could be prime minister. Forgive me on the terminology. But this individual comes to power, and one of the first things he talks about is discontinuing the globalist agenda, right? Discontinuing the control over food, the control over agriculture, the control over the different important infrastructure of society, right? And so the same is occurring all around the world. This populism that Donald Trump spawned in the Trump presidency here in the United States has now become an uncontrollable wildfire and is affecting areas where these individuals have had a very large amount of control for a very long time. It's always been safe to go hide in Argentina, right? It's always been safe to go hide in Spain. It's always been safe to go hide in the Netherlands, and certainly in the Middle East, where a tremendous amount of munitions, personnel, equipment, secret space technology, antiquities of humankind, et cetera, they're all kept in the Middle East and in the African subcontinent. So moving through this process, the defections that are occurring in the background have assisted we the people in a tremendous way. And so now we have those that are destabilized on the other side, still acting on behalf of that black hat agenda, and they're up against a wall. The choice at this point is, what do we do, right? We the people continue to awaken more each day. We are now, beginning to see levers of power shift in the world in our favor. We're witnessing the comeuppance of the Trump populist movement here in the United States. It's only growing in fervor and vigor. It is going to get much larger, much broader before this is all over. Again, I do think that we're going to see some very key involvement from Hunter as it pertains to these impeachment inquiries over these next coming days and perhaps weeks. We're building up to these Trump trials, which Q has highlighted for us is the Trump card, and Q has actually asked, at what stage do you play the Trump card? And then we have the election year of 2024 that is rampaging towards us here in the United States of America. All of the while, the rest of the world is experiencing the most colossal geopolitical power shift that has occurred in the last 100 years. We're seeing the return, I think, very soon of the Ottoman Turks, right? The de facto protectors of the Sunni Muslim world. We're seeing the restoration of different boundary lines in Eastern Europe. We're seeing the active neutering of the NATO military alliance ability to respond, right? We're seeing Turkey, a member of NATO, essentially calling for war against Israel, which puts NATO, the NATO alliance itself, into a suicide spot, and really provides, I think, what's going to amount to a failure to start should that campaign kick off over the winter months here. And I do believe that it's likely it will. We're seeing Russia continuing the campaign in Ukraine. Avdiivka is now fully surrounded, and Kiev is next on the chopping block. It's my belief that we will see Russia liberate Kiev by winter's end of 2023. How will NATO treat this? What will they be able to do really? Why are NATO exercises occurring in a very high concentration and with great frequency and regularity in the Baltic states specifically? Why is Finland closing part of its border? I believe Finland will close its entire border before this process is over, because we have biological laboratories funded, once again, by the US DOD and different NATO powers, to include the Israeli IDF and Mossad, that exist in these areas, right? In Finland, in the Baltic states, in Eastern Europe, in Southeast Europe, down towards the Istanbul corridor, right? This is an area of the world that has had a tremendous amount of biological terrorism effort, resources, etc., put into it, and we're seeing the exposure and the liberation of those complexes by Russia and the Russian aligned, what we would call maybe a military movement, right? A military alliance, a soft military alliance between the different powers in the world, with Russia acting as the spearhead, certainly in Europe, and I believe to be in the Middle East very soon as well. This is a time where our enemies are desperately and deathly afraid. This is a time where they have never been placed up against the wall on all fronts like this. This is a time where they've never been able this is the first time that they've never been able to get away. It's the first time that we have cut off their routes of escape. It's the first time that we have assaulted their perimeter from all fronts, from all available opportunistic conduits, right? From all areas. And they simply do not have the bandwidth, the capability, and the resources and power to maintain their status quo, to maintain their control, and not also awaken mankind at the same time. And what is so incredible with this is that mankind is awakening regardless. This process has produced such destabilization in the world that the world will never be the same, regardless of what your lens of conspiracy, regardless of what your interpretive idea of the situation that's happening around the world is. We have seen such incredible change. We have seen such de-dollarization, such multipolarity arise, the disconnection from the Washington, D.C. aid arm, right? The disconnection from the Washington, D.C. military intelligence arm. We've seen a number of different nations iron out very firm, solid private trade arrangements, private military cooperative arrangements between them and them alone, sidelining both the U.S. commerce markets and the U.S. Department of Defense and the defense industrial complex that emanates from Washington, D.C. And it's only going to get, I think, a little bit more dramatic as we go forward. We still have to see the campaign in Taiwan. We still have to see the collapse of Asian financial markets, which will collapse the SWIFT North American and the SWIFT Western financial markets, the World Bank, the IMF, things of this nature. These events are yet to occur, and yet I believe we are into those phases right now. It's my belief that the events that happened in Gaza on October the 7th of 2023 began a phase in this process, began a military coordination phase to put the world into a place of stasis, if we could call it that, a situation where everything is paused for a short time, a hard pause. If we could look at the soft pause that we're in right now, right, post-Trump presidency, optically here in 2023, we could say that a hard pause is coming. We know that the Biden government is likely to invoke the War Powers Act of 1973, the same basis of authority that the W. Bush administration invoked on 9/23/01 to invalidate a tremendous amount of the U.S. Bill of Rights and to institute a shadow military dictatorship here in the United States of America. Why has it been legal for foreign entities to cheat on the election systems, right? Why has it been legal to share certain intelligence capabilities and certain reconnaissance gathering with state actors who are not in the interest of we the people? Why has all of that been allowed? It's been allowed because we have been in a state of wartime national emergency here in the United States for more than 20 years. And so the culmination of this symbolically, and I think necessarily, must be the realization of the shadow power into the surface level, right? The realization of the background military dictatorship into the foreground as a military dictatorship. And the Biden administration has certainly shown themselves to be of this mindset throughout this process. And remember, even though Biden himself may be an actor, maybe a military cog installation, we still have a number of the bureaucracy, a very large quantity of the administration individuals and those that have participated in the federal bureaucracy and in the intelligence community who act essentially of their own will, and they're not beholden to the elect of we the people, right? The elected representatives. They're supposed to be, and yet they are not. And so this process brings out a number of different things as far as highlighting where they're at, how we can get to them, who needs to be dealt with, and how the process may end. We still have pandemic number 2 that we have to, sort of broach and move through as we go through this process, right? I believe that to be an election year event. 2024 is foretold in many schools of thought, many religious prophecies throughout the history of mankind as being a pivotal year for human history, a pivotal, almost apocalyptic style event for human history. And from that event rises we the people in alignment, I think, with our Creator, in agreement with the Holy Spirit and with the goodness that is humanity, to remake the world in the fashion that was always supposed to be made. And if I may, I'm going to take it so far as to say that we have some biblical basis. We have, I think, some evidence to show that when Q says it's going to be biblical, it truly is going to be biblical. It's going to be a spiritual event for humanity. It's going to be a series of events going through this process that will essentially create the legends and the lore for the next 1,000 years or so. And if we come to this Q drop, get over here discussing the sky event. Drop 1328 from the 10th of May 2018, actually posted by Q Plus, or who the Anons believe to be Donald Trump. Patriot, a person who loves, supports, and defends his or her country and its interests with devotion. A person who regards himself or herself as a defender, especially of individual rights, against presumed interference by the federal government. Traitor, a person who betrays another, a cause, or any trust. Person, or a person who commits treason by betraying his or her country. They want you divided. Divided you are weak. Together you are strong. There was no attempt to divide. There was, however, a strategic move to reveal. Be careful who you follow. Let me see here. I lost my place. Oh, there we are. Incorrect message translated. Past outists. Correction made. No names mentioned. They revealed themselves. Fake and false, incorrect decodes have been removed and resolved. Fake and false claims of an unknown allowed access to classified sealed indictments, removed and resolved. Do not fall victim to con artists. Use logic. Stay on point. This is not about a single person. This is not about fame, followers, or profiteering. We the people, we the people, we the people. There will come a time they will not be safe walking down the street. We will not be held hostage. Sky event. Where we go one, we go all. Q plus. If we come over here, there's another drop that discusses the sky event going back to April 2018, about a month prior to the drop I just read you. It's drop 1182. And this drop concludes with EO, treason, update, read, study the executive orders, follow the pin, EO's post pin picks, connect and learn, sky event. So the sky event, and that one is signed Q, not Q plus. So the sky event is brought up a couple of different times. Anons have been asking Q for a while if various things have been the sky event. I think many of us out there have felt for a long time that the sky event could be something like a staged blue beam alien invasion. But we have to acknowledge that when Q says this is biblical, there may be a different angle to this idea of a sky event. So if we come over to Isaiah, the book of Isaiah in the Holy Bible, chapter 13, this chapter is actually a prophecy from Isaiah against Babylon. The chapter reads, a prophecy against Babylon that Isaiah the son of Amoz saw. Raise a banner on a bare hilltop, shout to them and beckon to them to enter the gates of the nobles. I have commanded those I prepared for battle and have summoned my warriors to carry out my wrath, those who rejoice in my triumph. There is a noise on the mountains like that of a great multitude. Listen, an uproar amongst all kingdoms, like nations massing together. The Lord is mustering an army for war. They come from faraway lands, from the ends of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of wrath to destroy the whole of Babylon. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. Because of this, all hands will go limp and every heart will melt. Terror will seize them. Pain and anguish will grip them. They will writhe like a woman in labor and will look aghast at one another. The day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger, and will make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give light. The world will be punished for their evil, the wicked of their sins, and there will be put an end to the arrogance of the haughty and the ruthless. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place at the wrath of the Almighty in the day of a burning anger. Like a hunted gazelle, like sheep without a shepherd, they will return to their own people and will flee, and will flee to their native land. Whosoever shall be captured will be thrust through. All who are caught will fall by the sword. Sounds a lot like Q, doesn't it, Anons? None shall escape. Even their infants will be dashed to pieces. Their house will be looted and their wives destroyed. I will stir up against them the Medes, who do not care for silver and have no delight in gold. Their bows will strike down young men. They will have no mercy on them, and nor will they look with compassion on their children. Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms, the pride and glory of the Babylonians, will be overthrown by God like Sodom and Gomorrah. She will never again be inhabited or lived in through all generations. No nomads will pitch their tents, and no shepherds will rest their flocks. Only desert creatures will lie there. Jackals and the owls will dwell, and wild goats will leap. Hyenas will inhabit her strongholds, and the jackals her luxurious places. Her time is at hand, and her days are numbered. So Isaiah 13 clearly talking about the cabal, clearly talking about the Babylonian, deep state, Phoenician, Canaanite, dark occult power structure that has existed here in the world for several thousand years and has destroyed humanity in multiple different ways, right? Has assaulted us right down to our genome, has corrupted our bloodlines, our initial identity under God, right? And so we have a prophecy from Isaiah, the son of Amoz, in this book that deals with what amounts to, quite frankly, a terrible time if you're on the other side. But we come to verse 10 of this chapter. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. We could talk about solar eclipses, but the moon not giving its light would also have to be a lunar eclipse. A dual eclipse, I'm not sure if it's ever happened before. It may be possible. I'm not an astrophysicist or things like this nature, but I've never heard of one. I've never read of one. And so the thought began to occur to me, if we're talking about a sky event, if Q is referencing a sky event multiple times in the drops, and Q tells us multiple times it's going to be biblical, and Q tells us multiple times that they will not be able to walk down the street. In other words, it will not be safe for them anywhere. And we can trace this enemy back to Jericho, Jericho and Joshua, who God instructed to destroy every last man, woman, and child, because of the suffering that this bloodline, because of the immense travesty that this corruption of the human race was going to cause to humanity through the centuries, right, and through the millennia. Joshua was actually instructed to end their bloodline, to end the DNA level corruption right then and there, and that did not occur. And so we have a very powerful prophecy here in Isaiah that I believe ties back to Q, quite frankly, in some regards. Now, what's so incredible about this is December of 2020, we had a sky event. We had the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Actually, was December the 21st of 2020. If we come over here to nasa.gov, we'll read a short excerpt from the Not a Space Agency website. Sky watchers are in for an end-of-the-year treat. What has become known popularly as the Christmas star is a vibrant planetary conjunction easily visible in the evening sky on the night of December 21st. You can imagine the solar system, blah, blah, blah. It's been nearly 400 years since the planets passed this close to one another, and nearly 800 since the alignment of Saturn and Jupiter occurred at night. The closest alignment is just 1/10 of a degree apart. On the 21st, they will appear so close that a pinky finger at arm's length will easily cover both planets. The planets will be easy to see with the unaided eye by looking toward the southwest just after sunset. Bring over here, Anons. I've actually got a picture that I took that day, or excuse me, that I received that day. I'll see if I can share it with each of you. Share screen. The night of December the 21st, 2020, this image was taken from the desert in northern Iran looking west, right? And so we see the great conjunction there in the sky, what many have termed the Bethlehem star, the Christmas star, things of this nature. And I find it fascinating that the Bethlehem star corresponds with the triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in 7 BC. A major contemporary proponent of the 7 BC triple conjunction was David Hughes, the astronomer David Hughes. This gentleman was convinced that Jesus of Nazareth, was born on the 15th of September of 7 BC, based on a series of unions between Jupiter and Saturn. We've talked, and the article goes on to discuss how these conjunctions tied back to Johannes Kepler later on, and things of this nature. But we have an example, or excuse me, we have evidence that we can pull up. May 27th of 7 BC, according to astronomical records, Jupiter and Saturn in conjunction with one another in the constellation Pisces, with the Sun and Mercury in Gemini, Venus in Cancer, Mars in Virgo, and the Moon also in Pisces. In this conjunction, we actually see Jupiter, which is the scepter and king planet, in conjunction with Saturn, symbolic of Satan, in Pisces near the eastern sky as a result of Jupiter's proper motion. So in other words, this is sort of the inauguration of the kingdom of Satan, right? In the celestial calendar, we have the prince of the principalities of the air being given sort of a celestial license, if we will, being approved by God to be placed into really what amounts to a pseudo-Manchurian kingship role all around the world, right? Again, we're talking in sort of esoteric spiritual terms here. But what I found absolutely incredible is that just a couple of years later, in 5 BC, we see a nova reported by different Chinese astronomers, and many individuals have actually made the case that that nova could have been coinciding with Christ's birth, or at least Christ's coming into his own awareness here in the world, right? We have that 2 to 3 year period where babies are sort of unaware of themselves. They're almost, adorable little helpless fleshy balls. And then they become self-aware. They become cognizant. They become conscious, at least in realization form, that they are a human, right? That they are an organ or an organic life form that has willpower and needs and purpose, right? So if we go back here, let me see here. In AD 553, let me see here. Oh, here we go. Between 10 BC and 13 AD, there are 2 sightings of new stars. The first sighting is recorded in the Astronomical Treatise of the History of the Former Han Dynasty. This article is taken from adsabs.harvard.edu. And the title of the article is, let me go back here, An Astronomical Reappraisal of the Star of Bethlehem from the Royal Astronomical Society. In the second year of the Qimping reign period, in the second month, 5 BC of March to April of 5 BC, a Husing appeared at the Chinanyu for over 70 days. Husing is a broom star or a sweeping star and is a term usually applied to a comet. A description of a Husing generally makes mention of its motion. Let me see here. As the 5 BC record, however, does not mention any motion, it seems very possible that this object in the sky would have been a nova, and thus at a fixed celestial location with a rayed appearance resulting from distortions within the eye, which can occur for very bright objects. Several examples of this have been found in Chinese records. Clark and Stevenson, 1977, for example, Tycho's supernova of 1572 AD was also described as a Husing. So just a couple of years after the triple conjunction of 7 BC, which would have aligned, if we're going to draw the linear comparison, with the triple conjunction, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction of December 21st of 2020. If we're to make reference to the symbolism, right, the birth of Christ, the rebirth of maybe the Christ consciousness isn't necessarily the right term, but the rebirth of the Christian period, right, the Christian era here in the world coming in December of 2020. Then what we have left here is this nova or supernova style event that has failed to occur in our time, at least to this point, right? Now, there is a difference between a nova and a supernova. A nova is defined as a star that suddenly becomes much brighter and then gradually returns to its original brightness, right? The major difference between a nova and a supernova is that in a supernova, the object's mass is ejected in a stellar explosion. The amount of the mass is usually more than the mass of the star, whereas in a nova, a lot less mass is ejected. So a nova is not going to destroy the host star, right? A nova is going to draw attention to something celestially. A nova is going to capture the attention of anyone on Earth that is, ironing out astronomical records, tracking these sorts of things, right? But a supernova is going to cause the destruction of the host star, right? So much mass is ejected in a supernova, it destroys the star in which it occurs. And this is another difference, which is that a nova can be seen at the same place multiple different times throughout a period, right? But a supernova cannot. So we have yet to see a celestial supernova or a nova style event post great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in 2020. And yet Q talks about the sky event. And Ecclesiastes tells us that there's nothing new under the sun. And Q tells us it's going to be biblical. And what do we have as a candidate for a supernova, right, Anons? We have the red giant Betelgeuse in the constellation Orion that is widely believed in astronomical circles that are put out even into academia now, right? Even in the diatribe, the dogma of the deep state community that has obfuscated nearly every important component of our existence. That same dogma, that same indoctrination is discussing the idea that Betelgeuse will probably be a star to go supernova anytime in the next 100,000 years. But all of the reports that discuss the possibilities say that it could happen at any time. And a lot of these individuals worship the constellation Orion because they believe, that their deity or agents acting on behalf of their deity actually hail from this constellation, from this land that is far away in the celestial heavens. Now, I'm not making an assertion on what the nature of the heavens are, right? This is not necessarily a philosophical discussion on how these things are equipped and how they play out, but this is more to highlight that this is what they believe, right? This is what they choose to worship. This is how they choose to go about their dark occult practice at the very basic, right at the top of what we would call the hierarchy, the Illuminati pyramid of control in society. And so would it not make tremendous sense then for God to mark the beginning of their reign, all right, the beginning of their reign in this Piscean age that Christ inaugurated with his birth back 2,000 plus years ago with a nova, and then conclude their reign celestially outside of their control, whether they wish it to happen or not, with a supernova? I believe this to be the sky event that Q references. I believe that this is the event that Isaiah 13 says the constellations will not show their light. If you're standing in a room and all of the lights are on and it's dark outside, and then you bring 2 halogen spotlights into the room and turn those lights on, those lights will make all of the other lights in the room appear very much darker. They will appear to not give off their light, right? Their light will not necessarily be interpreted as readily or as easily. The photons are not intercepted as readily by the human receptors, right? The receptors that are in all of our eyes. And so it gives the appearance, it gives the premise, if we will, that the lights that are in the room are dimmed out, that they're, or maybe not even on at all, right? Depending on how bright you choose to set these spotlights in this metaphorical example. I believe the same to be true here in the world, right? I believe the same to be true in our celestial calendar. There's nothing new under the sun. Excuse me. And if we go back and we look at what the Mayan calendar has prophesied at different points along the way, one of the statements that the Maya made was that the end of an age would be marked with several sky events, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction being the beginning of that process. And the end of that process would conclude with world-changing events in weather, world-changing events in the sky, and humanity would know unequivocally that a divine force, a divine power, a great spirit, if we want to call it that, right, exists out there and is making moves, is conscious, is compassionate, is loving towards humanity, and is making moves to end the age of evil that has terrorized this world. We are living the most exciting, applicable, translational, relevant time that we could choose to live. I can't come up with, as I think about this, as I speak with all of you today, I can't come up with an example of a better time to be alive outside of being able to walk and talk with Jesus and understand the nature of life, the nature of God, the nature of love, the nature of who we are, right? That's the only time I can come up with as I reflect on the many different eras that we could go to throughout all of human history where I would rather be, right? This is such an amazing moment where God is showing the subservience of even the devil, right? The subservience of those forces of evil, the helplessness that those forces of evil actually have against the activation of the soul light within all of us, right? The activation of 8 billion of God's children here in the world. They can't stand up against that. It's going to wipe them out. It's going to destroy their bloodlines. It's going to cause their infants to live no more, right? It's going to cause the destruction, the full evisceration and immolation of Babylon itself. And the era that comes as a result of that is going to rebalance the world in a way that the world has not been balanced for thousands of years. This is an infiltration operation that we're throwing off. They infiltrated us right down to our bloodline, and now we are exfiltrating them out of everything. They're being shoved out of every safe house. They're being shoved out of every government. They're being shoved out of every weapons storehouse. They're being shoved into the light. They're being highlighted in business. They're being dragged out in academia. They're being brought up on charges of child pornography. Pizzagate is now another term that's on everyone's lips, right? Congratulations to Miss Crokin. She's the one that blew the whistle on that harder than anybody at first, and certainly more than anybody. And she has taken such tremendous reputational flack as a result of it. And yet we have confirmation now entering into the space that this was not a conspiracy, that this was an active situation that occurred. We have evidence, from the Wiener laptop for those hard digging anons to show the types of things that were happening with Pizzagate, with the Obama White House, etc. They are not safe from us. They are not safe from God. They are not safe from the preordainment, I believe, of many of the events that are now bringing about the end of an age of evil. This is an incredible time to be alive. And as we march through this winter, as we go through these weeks and these months, yes, it is hard. Yes, it is tough. Yes, it is arduous. My family, and my day job, for example, not exempt certainly from the difficulties that are happening out there. That's one of the reasons the file was delayed as much as it was this time, right? We see these things playing out. They affect us at the daily life level. We're caught within that Babylonian system. But what an incredible comfort, what an incredible encouragement, what an incredible feeling of inspiration and vitality to know that a coordinated worldwide military civilian assault of that Babylonian deep state system is occurring. We have the militaries handling fights that we the people can't have, and we the people are stepping back into our own power at all different levels, the community level, the state level, the federal, municipal level, and the different localities that we're in. And we are taking the fight to them on all fronts. They cannot keep up with all of us. They will fall. It is inevitable. And so as we see the events that occur over these next few weeks and months, Anons, be of good cheer. Be encouraged, be elated, be excited, be enthused. This is an amazing time. We get to witness history in the making. We get to witness the events of the water and the sky in ways that have not been witnessed here in the earth in generations, right? We're going to see events going through this process that will etch themselves into the memory of mankind. We will be able to tell the real story of the great war that brought about the end of the age of evil, that brought about the end of the bureaucratic cannibalism complex, that brought about the end, of the satanic Luciferian control in religious schools and in different governmental sectors and academia, that brought about the end of the military industrial community and the mind control complex and the medical mercenary industrial complex that destroyed the human lifespan, right? That eviscerated our ability to connect with one another at intangible sensory levels, right? We will be able to tell the story of what it was like to bring down the greatest evil that this world has ever seen. And we are doing so in conjunction with our patriots in militaries and governments around the world and our Creator. What an incredible time. And so, Anons, patriots, I hope very much that as you look at the content we've discussed in the file today, that you will look back and see how far we've come, as we also look forward to see what we have yet to accomplish. I believe that where we have come from and how far we have come outweighs any and all discomfort, any and all pressure, any and all pinching maneuvers that are forcing us into areas in our lives that we don't necessarily like, that we would rather see change, that we want to be different, right? We know that we have that we have come a long way, and that the transpiration of events in that process is leading to an inevitability where they lose. We know that justice is coming. And in many cases, we are seeing that justice served symbolically in small doses here and there and here and there all along through this process, right? I believe that justice to be much more public, to be a much more, commonly known thing as we go forward. And by the time we get to this most pivotal election that Donald Trump has talked about, if we get there, and I don't personally believe that we will, but for the sake of the discussion, by the time we arrive at that point, we, the people across all boundary lines, are going to be much more aligned, much more commonly interested with one another, certainly much more unified, and it will be a force of nature that this enemy has never had to face in all of their history. Be of good cheer. Be happy, Anons. Go outside today and appreciate the grandeur of what is occurring in the world. Go and spend some time breathing in the cool, crisp air. One of my favorite times of the year is the soft, cool air that comes in the fall and early winter months as we transition from more humid, hot air into a refreshing period where the air sort of changes. There's a change in the energy in the air. There's a change in how it feels to walk through nature, right? Enjoy that. Be sensitive to that. For in that, in my belief, is the essence of life. I very much appreciate each of you, and I wish you very well as we go through these processes and these phases. I'll be back with each of you again soon, more quickly this time for File 67 than our delay recently. Have a great day, everyone. This is SG Anon. Thanks. Bye-bye.